All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our latest ALTA Insights webinar. I'm Jeremy Yohe, ALTA's Vice President of Communications, and again, welcome to our latest webinar. Last week, we kicked off 2024 with a presentation from First American's Chief Economist, Mark Fleming, who shared his forecast for the coming year on the housing market. And today we're going to shift focus a lot from, order volume in business to the people who are going to handle the transactions, staff. And with that comes conversations that sometimes can't be easy. Hopefully this presentation will provide you with a little bit of a strategy, a game plan to proactively address, small minor problems before they bubble up and become bigger issues. Before getting started, I need to go through some of the housekeeping items. Today's presentation is being recorded. You'll get an email with a link to recording tomorrow, and you can always access all of our webinar recordings at alta.org/webinars. That's alta.org/webinars. In the email, you'll also get a link to download a copy, a PDF of the presentation. You can get a copy of it right now from the GoToWebinar window pane from handouts. As a reminder, everyone's lines are muted. If you have a question at any time during the webinar, please submit them through the questions box. We will hold some time at the end for Q&A. And if we don't get to your question, or if you think of something later, our speaker's contact information is in the slide deck. And with that, let me introduce today's speaker. Joining us today, we have Steve Rudolph. Steve has been with us in the past and has given webinars. Last year, he did one on leadership, and we had a lot of follow-up questions. And the questions were, how to resolve this, this scenario. So Steve's like, well, let's do a follow-up webinar that really digs into some of this stuff and some concrete examples to really give you examples on how to address issues you may have in your company. Steve is founder of Steve Rudolph Coaching, where he helps companies become better at managing people, coaching, and developing others. Some of his clients include Fidelity National Title Group, Novo Nordisk, and Amway. And I shared this last year when I noticed in his bio, and I'm going to share it again. I just find it fascinating, especially as it's wintertime and cold and snowy in Ohio. Steve was a guide for the U.S. Paralympic team, and he guided 2 visually impaired Nordic skiers in 2 Olympics. So I feel like if he can guide visually impaired skiers to make it to the finish line, it could probably help us, in walking through some difficult workplace conversations. So Steve, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Welcome, ALTA members. Great introduction. That interesting analogy about the visual impairment. Well, we'll see at the end here if I've been a successful guide for folks working through some tough workplace conversations. My name's Steve Rudolph. As Jeremy said, I've been working in the title agency with title agency leaders and their teams for almost 15 years, consulting, coaching, and training title agency leaders, their teams, and culture building. Excited to be here with you today to support it. But my background, in addition to that, I actually grew up in the restaurant business, not the title industry, but I do find a lot of similarities. Maybe we can chat about on the side sometime. But this is me as a restaurant owner. About 10 years ago, I sold it. No, actually, this is Gordon Ramsay from Hell's Kitchen. But this is what I turned out to be as a restaurant owner. I kid you not. And 3 big things I was thinking about today in terms of regards to tough workplace conversations. One is, as a leader, as we say, your mood is like secondhand smoke. Everybody breathes it in. And I was a workaholic. I was stressed out all the time. And so I brought that mood to work, and, it created a real frenetic, frenzied, unpredictable work environment because I was just stressed out all the time. I didn't take good care of myself, and I had to learn to have emotional regulation, and especially difficult workplace conversations. You have to be able to regulate our emotions. And the second thing is, I was either in terms of addressing unresolved workplace conflict and difficult conversations, I was either avoiding it and letting it go, or just overreacting. And it's kind of like at the extremes, and we're going to look at that today. Not working from the extremes of emotion and leadership and communication style, but trying to find that sweet spot in the middle, so these conversations can stay on the rails. And the third thing I realized when I bought the restaurant, I inherited a very toxic workplace culture. And I firmly believe, and I believe this applies to any business, title especially, is that happy employees equal happy customers. Let's not overcomplicate things a little bit. Of course, there's a lot that goes into a title transaction, as there is goes into delivering a great dining experience for guests that are paying, $50 for a steak. But you got to get the culture thing right. And so I really had to turn around my culture, because it was a culture of toxicity, a lot of gossiping, backstabbing, cliques, the front of the house against the back of the house. It was really bad. And so me and my management team, we crafted up our core values, got clear about how we wanted people to communicate and treat each other, because the employee experience is the guest experience. I strongly believe that. And if you have employees that are not caring for each other, not respectful of each other, not positive, I think that just translates to the customer. The customer is going to feel that and know that. So we really worked on the culture piece in terms of targeting this toxicity, and combined with the leadership and management team of proactively role modeling and enforcing core values around communication, particularly workplace conflict, and creating some policies. But so those are three big learnings I had as a business owner, and we'll get into some of those details in our session today. But here's kind of the headline. We know this to be true, right? If you don't talk it out, you'll act it out. And so today's really about developing that proactivity and having those communication skill sets to have the confidence and competence to early on address small things before they really blow up into big things. So here's the first poll. Jeremy, you tee this up.
Yep, here we go.
See what we get here. So let's look at the cost of unaddressed workplace conflict, because it has a cost to it. So let's just.
Yeah, we'll keep the poll open for a few more seconds here. We got about 40% of you have voted so far. We've got 64% all of the above. The other three are pretty much split evenly.
Great. Yeah, it's all the above. This comes from the authors of the book Crucial Conversations in their company, and about 43% of respondents gave it at $10,000. About 30% put it at 25 grand, and about 19% put it at the higher amount, 25 grand. But either way, cut the number any way you like it, but just be clear that we need to be honest that workplace conflict does have a cost to it. And those are some pretty big numbers. And let's look at some more sobering costs of workplace conflict. We'll just start off with kind of a stomach punch right now. But more than half of employees report experiencing regularly workplace conflict. The average US employee spends 2.8 hours a week dealing with conflict, which translates to approximately 359 billion, that's correct, billion, not million, in paid hours annually in the United States. 25% of employees who experienced conflict reported taking time off from work due to the conflict, resulting in an average of 2.6 days of lost productivity per employee per year. And job-related stress costs US businesses an estimated $300 billion annually. So, we have to be honest as leaders of our organizations that if you have unresolved conflict, it comes at a cost to the company. And of course, as leaders and managers, we are always trying to cut costs or improve revenue. One or the other lanes we're always trying to drive. So this is a cost area, waste area of human potential in the workplace, of talent and employee engagement. When you have cultures like the one that I inherited, that a lot of gossipy behavior, a lot of backstabbing, passive aggressive behavior. And this doesn't even talk about the human health cost of unresolved conflict, the impact on mental well-being, anxiety, depression, cardiovascular diseases associated with workplace stress. That's a whole nother slide of data points, but I think we probably get the point here that it does come at a cost, in addition, of course, to the morale and trust in the workplace and so forth, which we'll jump into. So Sorry to start off on not too much of a positive note here, but things will go up. We'll go up from here and get more positive. Here's another quick poll because we want to just explore. Let's bring this down to the manager level here. So how do leaders and managers contribute to poor workplace dynamics? Another quick poll for you.
Yeah, hey Steve, one of the bullet points I couldn't add, the system only let me add 5.
Oh, okay, great, thanks.
One of the reasons aren't there, so it doesn't match up with the slide deck.
I think when I created, I remember there was a constraint there, and I figured you'd do your best, but I think this will get the point across here.
Well, I think everyone is hitting the mark here. 99% of all have selected all the above.
Yeah, we got it. So we have found the enemy, and it's us. We tend to under communicate. We tend to avoid. We tend to minimize. We tend to let small things fester into big things, and we don't have a cadence of quality, substantive communications that let people know where they stand and where they're crossing the boundary lines of acceptable workplace behavior and performance. And that's really what we're focusing on in our session today together, is developing those competencies, mindsets, and skill sets to be able to proactively address workplace conflict before it balloons up. You know, here's what I've found: when you master these skills and your management culture gets good at this, you don't eliminate all the difficult workplace conversations, because, you know, human beings, they just do some crazy stuff, or they do things that are just will get them terminated from their job. But I have found that if you get good at managing these conversations in a proactive way, it eliminates or minimizes 80% of drama in the workplace. Is what I found. Not 100%. This is no silver bullet, but I stand by 80%, and so that's a huge cost reduction if you and your team get good and build the culture that you want to address these in a constructive way. So we have to address this, I think, right at the front end. But failing to effectively address workplace conflict and manage these tough conversations, it's a failure of leadership. I think we just have to own that, say it right out the front end. And everyone just put 99% of people just clicked all the above box. Yeah, that's a failure of leadership and management, which our primary job is to be communicating all the time our expectations and where people are standing in terms of those expectations. So that's the bad news. Things will go uphill from here, but we'll start off with some sobering reality, because that's the only place we can start if you want to make a transformation at your title agency moving forward. I also want to say, folks, you know, today's workshop is mostly targeted towards leaders and managers, but if there's frontline team members on here today, the skill sets you'll learn today largely apply to peer-to-peer conversations as well. There's some nuanced differences, and I'd be happy to field any email questions about those as well. Happy to respond. But here's what we're up to today: understand the sobering, staggering cost of unresolved workplace conflict. We can check that box. We just did it. Learn some workplace conflict resolution strategies to improve morale, trust, and employee engagement while minimizing your legal exposure. I'll share a couple structural process considerations for you. Look at your go-to communication style and where maybe you can flex your communication style to better meet the moment and engage people in a constructive conversation that has a mutually beneficial outcome. And then we're going to look at those specific communication skill sets for these tough conversations. And finally, really make the invitation to you to commit to strengthening a leadership communication thing leaving today. Maybe there's just one nugget or a couple nuggets take away, but really make a commitment to put that into play, because knowledge has no value unless you actually translate it and apply it to the workplace. So really invite you to make that leadership commitment moving forward. So here's another, this is really staggering for me, that only 12% of businesses have a formal process for resolving conflicts that involve legal claims, coming from the American Bar Association. So, you know, part of today is minimizing the exposure of liability you have for workplace drama, so you don't end up, you know, in a legal situation because of a charge of bullying in the workplace or discrimination or sexual harassment. You know, any of those things that can cause someone to make a legal claim against you. So here's some thoughts for you moving forward today in 2024, a way to build a culture of constructive communication, but also a way to prevent your legal exposure, but developing policies and procedures for handling conflict. I can't tell you how many times leaders in businesses, they don't really have a policy and procedures for handling conflict in the workplace, or if they do, they're not operationalized. So that's usually a good place to start, is get clear on what is our policy and making sure people are, trained and, onboarded around those. And then, as I said, in my restaurant experience, I think creating core values that emphasizes timely, honest, and respectful communication, building that culture of honesty, respect, and candor that you want to build, I think is the next step I would really always recommend. And then you have to inspect your leaders and managers to model and reinforce these core values. It's the idea, it's been, a leader told me once, if you're unwilling to fire a top performer for violating your values, then you don't have a culture. So, having a set of core values that are actually operationalized and you enforce those is a way to communicate that to your employees. And then providing conflict resolution training for employees and managers. It's one thing to say to your employees, if you have a conflict, you have to work it out between you before you bring it to the manager, which is I think the right thing to do. But if people don't have the skills to resolve conflict in the workplace, you can't ask people to do something they don't know how to do, right? So I think it's always imperative to provide conflict resolution training for employees and managers to give them these skill sets, and that's why you're here today. You're receiving these. And then upskilling your managers around managing difficult conversations, making sure your management team has these core fundamental conversation skill sets, which is why you are here today and I am going to deliver. So that's kind of the architecture for your culture, the structure and processes in place, and getting clear with people about your expectations around managing conflict. Let's pause and reflect on your communication style, your go-to communication style. We look at this continuum from passive to aggressive. All of us fall somewhere along this line, and assertive is kind of that sweet spot in the middle, which I'll say more about, but that's what we're really trying to get to in these conversations, is being assertive, not aggressive, and not passive. And then there's a third style, which is the passive aggressive behavior. Let's just punch through these, and then I got a little poll here for you just to reflect on. And think about this. This isn't when you're on your best day or your worst day. This is your kind of go-to day in and day out. We all fall somewhere on this line around addressing workplace conflict and holding people accountable. And we have all of this in us. Some days we're more aggressive, like you saw that picture of me of Gordon Ramsay. I was on the aggressive side of the communication, and I had to really move over to the passive side and bring more human warmth and empathy into how I correct people. But let's punch through these here right now and just reflect on this. Passive communication. These are your conflict avoiders, your people pleasers. I was one of those. You probably learned that in your family. Most of us learned our communication style in our families. But we're not very good at expressing feelings or needs. We defer tough decisions, and we're always thinking about other people other than ourselves. And this often leads to misunderstanding, and that can build up and turn out to be anger or resentment. You can pop off and actually get aggressive. So those are your more passive communicators. Your aggressive communicators, they're really good at expressing feeling, needs, and ideas, but it's at the expense of others, right? They ignore other people's rights. They trample on people's sovereignty and integrity. And these are the people, we kind of call jerks in the workplace. These are people that are really alienated. They're defensive or hostile when confronted, and they often alienate and hurt other people's feelings. So they're good at expressing how they feel, but it's at the expense of other people, and that is not a constructive space to be in. And your passive aggressive communicators, these folks, they appear passive on the surface, right? But they subtly act out anger by exerting control of others, by sarcasm, manipulation, and indirect communication, or avoiding the conversation. So your passive aggressive types, these are tough to work with. Your narcissists fall into this camp. Your really self-oriented people fall into this camp, and they can be really tough to nail down, can't they? Because they're good at manipulation, and they're good at really manipulating the social environment to where they're either the victim or they're good at playing the victim at times if you try to confront them. And then finally, this we covered that limited consideration for rights. But here's really what we're after, is being assertive communication, and this is direct, honest communication of your thoughts and feelings, while respecting the feeling, ideas, needs, and thoughts of other people. And this is what we're going for today, was we're trying to find that yes and. Yes, I hear you have this opinion. Yes, I hear you have this perception. Yes, I hear you're drawing this conclusion. And here's mine. Here's how I feel. Here's how I think about it. And we'll talk about the power of being assertive. And one thing I want to note here, people can misinterpret assertive behaviors as aggressive. Like sometimes Americans can come off as aggressive if you're traveling in other countries, and women can often be mislabeled as a result, in terms of gender bias in the workplace. I just want to say something about that. If you have a man, just to generalize here, if you have a guy that says, I disagree with you, I think this is the way we should go. And we're often can think, oh, he's tough. But if a woman says the same thing, right, we can label her as, you know what I'm saying. So we have to be careful around this assertive thing, and if we have biases around our interpretations when we see this style. But we have all of these in us. On our good days, we're better than others. On our bad days, we're probably worse than others. But we're really trying to get to that assertive piece. So here's your poll, just as a little reflection piece. Oh, I also want to say that passive is not necessarily negative. It depends on the context. If you're in a threatful situation, being passive might be the best way to stay safe. And if you're in a dangerous situation, on the streets or something, so it's context, an aggressive communication style might keep you safe and alive, right? So context matters a lot. So don't hear me that it's not a one size fits all. Depends on the situation. Okay, what's your go-to communication style? Pick one. Not on your best day, not on your work day, but where do you show up when you come into these in terms of workplace conflict? How do you show up?
Keep the poll open for a little bit, a few more seconds. We got 2/3 of you who voted. It's pretty even between passive and assertive. Steve, while we have this open, maybe if you could provide a little more color on how do you be assertive but yet not viewed aggressive? I think maybe you touched on it a little bit, but I think I struggle with that. Okay, I'm clear, but okay, I'm not too in your face.
Yeah, and we're going to dive right into that, Jeremy. We're going to dive right into that that assertive piece, what that looks and sounds like. So hold that thought. Great question.
All right. Well, here we go. Here are the results. 47% assertive, 38% passive. Some out there are passive aggressive.
Yeah, great. We have 12% of people that are being very self-honest there. Thank you for recognizing a couple on the aggressive side. Yeah, I was an aggressive communicator. I don't know if you've done personality styles, folks, but my DISC personality, I'm a pace setter, I'm a hard driver. As I shared with you my restaurant experience, I had to learn to regulate that to bring more of a human, softer, passive element into my communications to improve my working relationships. So it sounds like people are that assertive to passive side. Research says this: if you, in terms of leadership development, people that are fairly aggressive have an easier time flexing their leadership to become more passive, to become a little softer and more human relational. But people on the passive side have a harder time being more assertive. I mean, does that make sense to you? Kind of makes sense to me. I've been coaching leaders for quite a while, and I find that to be true, that the aggressive folks, if they're really committed to strengthening their communication, have an easier time going softer than the softer folks have going harder. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So if you are over on that passive side, it's tough to learn to be assertive, but it's possible. These are behaviors. And I'm going to give you that language around there, that language and tone that Jeremy was just asking about, to provide more clarity how you can start talking more assertively starting today. We did that. So let's look at your culture. Let's pause right here. And my invitation for you to consider is creating a feedback-rich culture by creating a cadence of quality communication. A feedback-rich culture where there's a lot of trust that the management team is going to be honest and people are going to be honest with each other is your best preventative measure for difficult conversations, where you can head off a lot of these conversations. I put up Pat Summa. She was the coach of the Tennessee Vols women's basketball team, and she passed away a few years ago, bless her soul. but she was one of my favorite coaches. And she was one of the winningest all-time sports coach, not just women's sports, but men's as well. She was the most winningest coach until Coach K from Duke went out a couple years ago and passed her record. But she was a phenomenal coach. And clearly, I mean, this is a tough love coach. And I think about assertiveness is that tough love approach, that people know you care about them, but you're going to be direct and honest with them. And I tended to think of work as a sports team, just to, at the risk of stretching a sports analogy. But it would be ludicrous, right? If any of us were coaching a team, and probably many of you on the calls coached probably your kids' teams growing up and so forth. But if you said to your team, okay, I want you to go out this year, we got 30 games to play. I want you to work hard. I want you to play together as a team. And at the end of the year, we're going to debrief the season, right? At the end of the year, we're going to debrief the season. That'd be ludicrous, right? But think about many companies still doing the annual performance review or even the biannual performance review. And that's essentially what it is. It's like you're only going to get feedback, good feedback, once or twice a year, and it's going to cover the last 6 months. It's ludicrous. I'll go on my soapbox for in just a second about that. But no, on a sports team, we have a cadence of quality, substantive conversations, timeouts and huddles and pre-game plans. And I think this is the type of mentality one should bring, even if you're not a sports aficionado, whatever works for you, theater group or an orchestra, whatever works for you, but creating a cadence of quality communications. And I want to share a few of these that I would recommend really zeroing in on for 2024 if you're not already. But this is the idea that smaller, sooner conversations are better than bigger, later conversations, right? I'm sure we can all agree on, and that's really what we're up to here, is getting your management and leadership team to have smaller, sooner, substantive conversations rather than bigger, later conversations, so we can minimize these difficult workplace conversations. And how we do that is, the first place I recommend you starting is your folks, in terms of feedback, should be getting more positive than negative or critical or constructive feedback in the workplace. This number 3, 4 to 1 has been largely studied. It's quantifiable. High performing organizations and their teams, leadership teams, this is the ratio in the culture. It's 3 to 4 to 1, positive to negative. So you can start using that metric, and being in the title business, I know you love KPIs and metrics. There's one for you to start with. This is the cheapest thing you can do to prevent difficult conversations, to minimize those. Leaving the webinar today, it's just increase the level of authentic, not just thanks for coming to work on time, but authentic, sincere, meaningful recognition in the workplace. And coming up with some sort of daily recognition and reward process to ensuring that all people are getting caught doing it right in the workplace. You should be managers. You should be conducting quality weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones. Monthly is too long. Too much time goes behind. Now you may be thinking, oh, I don't have time for this. We're so busy. I hear this from title agencies, leaders all the time. But let me just reframe it for you for a second. One, if you get good at one-on-ones, and most managers are not very good at one-on-ones, I'll just have to say, they are highly productive conversations. And by the way, I'm talking 15 to 20 minutes a week, or 15 to 20 minutes bi-weekly at the most. If you are good at these one-on-ones, you can have a great quality conversation in 20 minutes. Trust me on this. Here's the other thing, is that when I ask great manager coaches what sort of output they get from a great one-on-one, in other words, after that one-on-one, how much more engaged, productive is that employee, in terms of attitude and so forth. And most managers will say, oh, I can expect a 30 to 40% uplift in that employee's output, productivity, attitude, team play, collaboration after a good one-on-one. 30 to 40%. You tell me another managerial activity that has that kind of leverage. Can you name one? Put it in the chat box. I'd be curious to see that. You get 30% output, return on investment, from 20 minutes of a quality one-on-one. There is none. And so your one-on-ones, when they're done well and with a consistent cadence, are the number one tool for building a high engaged workplace and for attracting and retaining people. And there's just so much good stuff that happens there. And of course, your weekly or monthly department or team meetings, a regular cadence for your departments and teams, keeping those conversations going. And I recommend ditching the performance reviews. I know you can email me a scathing email, but I'm telling you, this is where This is where corporate America is going, is ditching the, let me just tell you this, where did the annual performance review come from? Does anybody know? Well, it came from after World War II, that the Army tried to figure out a way how to promote people, and there was only so many coveted positions to promote people, so they came up with an assessment system that turned into corporate America into the annual performance review, or the rank and yank system with the bell curve, right? Your low performance, medium performance, high performance. That was designed by the military because they only had a few coveted spots. And so think about that. 70 years later, we're still using annual or biannual performance review system. Why? It's just a legacy system that research after research shows is absolutely, nobody likes it. It's not effective. It takes a ton of managerial employee time. It's costly to the customer, to the company. And when you couple it in with pay, compensation, and raising, it just gets really bad. So just quickly separate your performance reviews from the compensation conversation. That's a separate conversation based on performance, I recommend. And go to QTP's quarterly touch points, also known as light performance reviews light, which I like. And that way you're guaranteed that your people are getting regular feedback on a regular basis, and it's substantive in quality. And I see a lot of companies going to the quarterly touch points combined with the one-on-ones, keeping the communication plate clean, and it really creates a much more dynamic, inclusive, and employee satisfaction scores are much higher when they work for an organization that has more quality, consistent feedback. So that's my soapbox a little bit on performance reviews. Again, send me an email. We can have a good conversation about that. But here's, Jeremy, back to your question. Here's what we're up to here in difficult conversations, in talking straight, being assertive. You can also call it straight talk. Say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean, right? So that's the sweet spot we're trying to find. That's what we're trying to get to here. One of my favorite authors, Brene Brown, she's got really great TED Talk. She says that kind is clear and unkind and unkind is unclear. Kind is being clear, unkind is being unclear. And so I make a distinction between nice and kind in the workplace. Nice is civil manners. That's just basic manners. Kind is I respect you so much. I want you to win so much. I want you to be successful. That I'm going to be honest with you. That's being kind. So we make this distinction between nice and kind. And I find some of the more dysfunctional, less performing organizations are nice organizations where nobody is willing to confront anybody. It's the opposite of a culture of candor. It's a culture of niceness. And niceness, I think, kills a business because it lacks candor. When people aren't honest with each other, you can't fix problems, and it's just a drag on the business. And I think you probably know what I mean. So that's one thing, make a distinction between nice and kind. So let's dive into it here. I want to give you 3 conversation examples here, and you determine whether passive, assertive, or aggressive for fun. So addressing poor performance with Maria. I got to talk to Maria about her poor performance in an area. So here's how it goes. Hi, Maria, how you doing? How are your days off? Is your mom feeling better? How's the cat doing? So how's work going? Passive, assertive, or aggressive? Hopefully everyone says passive, really bad. It's vague, it's non-direct, it's nice, but it's not kind, is it? Yeah, I'm being nice, all right, but I'm not kind. And of course, you come into a conversation like this, you open a conversation like that, this more than likely Maria is going to leave this conversation feeling what? Frustrated or unclear, or thinking you agree with her or you agree to disagree with her. But it's just so vague and non-direct that this is absolutely an unproductive way to start a conversation. So that's being passive. I'm being a little exaggeratory here, but you've been around a while. I'm sure you've probably heard or opened a conversation like this yourself. So example 2, addressing poor performance. Maria, I can't believe how sloppy your work has been lately. Your TPS reports are filled with errors. You need to step up your efforts or your job will be in jeopardy. Passive, assertive, or aggressive? Hope you said a little bit on the aggressive side here, right? It's critical, it's negative, it's disrespectful, it's sarcastic. You're using your power of authority over her, and it's non-collaborative, it's non-partnership, it's it's going to cause Maria to do what we can imagine. How would Maria, or how would you react? You're going to retreat, and you're going to go into that fight or flight. You're going to probably go into flight mode, and your trust between you and Maria has just plummeted, and the relationship has just taken a big hit. And these are conversations here. Once you put these words out here with that kind of sarcastic, critical tone, you can't take them back. And so we have to be, as I had to learn, be really careful with your words and tone in these conversations. So here's the third example. Maria, thanks for meeting. I have quality concerns regarding your last few TPS reports, which I have here to review. Before I share my concerns, is everything going okay for you? Good to hear that, glad to hear. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to say that 90% of your work is of a very high quality. It just seems to be these TPS reports that are falling short. I'm confident we can align on expectations and brainstorm a path forward. How's that sound? Passive, assertive, or aggressive? Hopefully you think this is assertive, and I wrote it trying, this is my style of communication. You might use different words, that's okay, but let's just break this down and why we think this can work. First of all, our goal is to reduce people's what coming into these conversations? Their defensiveness. They're going to be in a fight or flight mindset, right? So we have to do things at the front end to make it safe for them to receive and hear the feedback. And so that's what I was doing here. First of all, the first sentence, I think this works because I'm being specific. I'm not being vague. I'm being specific and direct. I have quality concerns. Notice I'm not giving her any feedback yet. This is just the setup for the conversation. Exactly what, we'll look at the reports, but this is just opening it up. So it's specific and clear, and I think that's works best. Before I share my concerns, is everything going okay for you? That's a move of empathy. This is an important move in these conversations. Seek to understand first. This takes a little longer, but this really lowers the threat response in the employee receiving this. Is you genuinely, and you have to be genuine, you have to be sincere, of course, and get their side of things, see how things are going. Now, notice you would never say, this is an HR side thing, you'd never say, how's things going at home? We don't ask personal questions like that. We just express genuine concern. In the world, that's a different thing, but we don't ask there. That's bad HR. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to say that 90% of your work is of very high quality. I put that there because I think if you put in some positive at the beginning of these conversations, it can lower their defensiveness and create more safety. And I like this one because what this one does, it's a proportional assessment statement, because it's not all of your work. I'm not questioning Maria's total quality for work. I want to hear some balance. That 90% of your work is great. It's just this one area. And that can really make people feel more at ease. Oh, okay, I'm not in trouble here. It's just this one area I got to work on. So I call that a balance, or bringing in a proportional statement. And it's also, there's a positive in there saying that she's a high quality employee. And I think the last sentence works. I'm confident expresses belief. And in these conversations, most people are worried about what? Is my job at risk? Am I in trouble, right? That's what's going through their head. Am I going to get fired? And so expressing belief and confidence is a way to lower, again, that defensiveness and fight or flight and put them more into a safe thinking space. And also notice the use of the pronoun we. I'm confident we can align on expectations and brainstorm a path forward. And that we pronoun we should use liberally in these conversations, because the we pronoun builds collaboration and partnership. And it also expresses how the conversation is going to go. We're going to brainstorm a path forward. So lets her know, okay, we're going to brainstorm a path forward, and that gives her clarity about how it's going to go. So that's my version of a little more assertive conversation. Hopefully folks find that useful. Steal elements of this if this language works for you. And Jeremy, does that begin to answer assertive language for you?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for walking through it's not actually that complicated. It's just being, to the point and clear. And what you said, being honest.
That's it. That's it. And notice how many times do you see in here of me using the pronoun you? 0. It's I. So assertive speakers use I language. I think, I feel, I've observed, I've noticed, I'm concerned, I'm disappointed, I'm. So we use I because that really minimizes defensiveness. And we try to use we and us as much as possible. So I and us and we are our go-to pronouns, and so language does make a difference. Great, Jim. I'm glad that's
yeah, I definitely like the we and us approach. It's that team concept that, hey, I am providing this critique of this area of your job performance, but going forward, we together can be successful.
Yeah, and it really expresses gives a lot of context and meaning for the person when they hear that language. It really calms them down, because we want to get them into a thinking state. So here's a little quote that I just want to emphasize, this empathy piece. The study found that training Fortune 100 executives to begin difficult work conversations with empathy reduce the time it took to resolve the issues by as much as 80%. So empathy is your go-to tool, folks. And here's the power of empathy. Empathy says, I hear you, I understand you, I see your viewpoint, I can see how you can come to that conclusion, and I don't have to agree with you. It's a powerful place to be in. And we're gonna really go into that a little bit deeper here. I wanna give you some empathy statements that really captures that yes and the quality of that assertive, more direct, non-aggressive communication. So here's some skills. Let's walk through these, and we'll close up with another scenario. But preparation, mindset. I recommend reframing difficult or tough with a positive intention. So rather than calling these difficult conversations, we call it difficult conversations to have a headliner to get you to come on the webinar. But when you actually go in these conversations, drop difficult, drop tough, drop the ugh feeling, and replace it with a different positive intention. For example, I'm committed to strengthening this relationship and our communications with this person. So rather than calling it a difficult conversation, you can say, this is going to be a developmental conversation. I want to use this conversation as a way to develop this person so they can achieve their highest potential working here and be successful. So that's the mindset game. Reframe it from the negative to the positive. Why? It's not just words, because we know that belief drives behavior. Belief drives behavior. So change your belief system about this person for this conversation. Be clear on the outcomes. Where are you going in this conversation? You want to do a little planning here without over scripting the conversation. But what's the goal? What's the outcome? And usually your outcomes are along the lines of a request, an agreement, next steps, the path forward, an action plan, a written warning. Be clear in your mind where you're going, because these conversations can go sideways quickly, right? And they can get real messy. And when you have a target and you know where you're going, that's going to keep you on track and to come back there. And emotional intelligence, EQ, clear your emotions, and in these conversations as much, smile and breathe. And breathing, as we know, deeper belly breathing is a way to manage stress. That's the go-to, whether you're a Navy SEALs, any special ops, an elite athlete, any elite performers. Where do they go to regulate? They go to breathing exercises. So that's where like mindfulness and meditation, and even if you do prayer, anything that gets you to center, you're able to center and breathe yourself and regulate the emotional system of your body. Because usually under stress, where do we go, right? Our breathing becomes shallow up into the throat, upper chest area, right? So get practicing just doing belly breathing, just slow or deep breaths to calm down the system, and smile. Why do I say smile? And not a freaky smile, just a light, gentle smile. Because neuroscience shows. Yes.
Hey, Steve, sorry, I just want to interject here because I had a comment from a listener, Linda. It's right, spot on though, and I put down in my notes also, be authentic. Linda says, but be genuine, because sometimes we think we are being empathetic, but our tone or body language may not align. Do you think this is a fair statement? So definitely your smile. Yeah. So sorry. Go ahead.
No, great comments. Again, human beings, they have strong BS detectors, and your mother was right. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And we know tone has more impact on the receiver than the words or nonverbal communications. We want to pay attention to our words and be disciplined with our language. And that tone has a big bearing. So she's so right that we have to be aware of the tone we bring. Absolutely. And that's where smiling and breathing can keep you calm and keep you into a good calm state. So it sounds authentic, so it sounds sincere, and hopefully you are being sincere and genuine. If not, people are going to feel it, right? You can't fake this stuff. You can't fake. And obviously we didn't really talk about this, but if you don't have a strong trusting relationship with your team members, these conversations become really tough, don't they? But if you have and that's why I really encourage a cadence of quality conversations like one-on-ones. That's where you build trust and rapport and get to know each other on a deeper level and connect. And so when you do have to have these conversations, they're a little bit easier. Why? Because the person knows you have their best interest at stake, and you can't fake that. And that relationship has to be built ahead of time. Otherwise, these become really, really onerous, tough conversations. Yeah, everyone knows that. So we've covered this. Be direct, be kind, positive without sugarcoating. Have specific examples. Facts are your friends, managers, as we know. People, you go coming in these with just vague examples. The conversation is going to go south quickly and you're going to lose. Be empathetic. I'm going to give you some more statements here in just a second. Your seek to understand move. How do you build empathy and genuineness? Be a great listener. Slow down, paraphrase, summarize, clarify. So what I hear you saying, Maria, is you didn't know the TPS reports had this level of quality threshold in there. Is that my understanding? Yes, that's my understanding. I was never taught that. Oh, gosh, you never taught that. And that brings me to empathy. If you ever have to apologize, and this is a great way to start off these conversations, is you own your part in it. If there's a part in this that you need to play, own it at the front end and apologize. And if you apologize sincerely, not I apologize, but not that one, but sincerely apologize. And that can really build some safety. So, for example, it wouldn't be uncommon to say, hey, Jeremy, I've got to apologize at the front end of this conversation because I've been meaning to speak with you about the quality of your TPS reports for several weeks now. And I fell on dereliction of duty. I'm not being proactive. So I apologize at the front end. I didn't bring this to your attention quicker. So a lot of times, folks, in these conversations, we play a part in this. If we've been avoiding or hoping it would change or something else, then you got to own that at the front end. And that can be really a great way to create more safety in the conversation. So look, managing and leading people is hard and difficult and complex. We're not going to get it perfect. Do your best. And when we do stumble a little bit, don't beat yourself up. Just reset the relationship and move forward. Reset expectations. This is the yes and statement. I'm going to give you some statements here. We're always going to go back to our expectations, values, standards, policies, procedures, etc. This is where we're going to reset the conversation no matter what they say. And again, where are we going? What's the outcome? What's the request? We're going to agree on next steps. So here's some core fundamental skills. If you practice these and play these through, these work really well. These create a great constructive conversation that's mutually respectful and beneficial and with positive outcomes. Okay, let's put these into play, most of them. And express appreciation for having a tough conversation. I always like to finish these up with, gosh, thank you for your honesty. I like to remind them of my intention. My intention coming in this conversation was I wanted to make our relationship stronger by being honest and constructive with each other. And I feel like we've accomplished that. How do you feel right now? So I'll check in with them, but I like to express appreciation for honesty and candor because, it takes courage. So here's some lines, Jeremy, back to your great question about assertiveness and building empathy and how to disagree without being disagreeable. So this is what this sounds like. These are yes and statements. I understand your viewpoint, but I see it another way. I hear you, though I have a different opinion. Again, watch your tone on these comments. I am trying to see it your way, but ultimately I think differently about this situation. I can see your perspective and I have a different viewpoint. I understand how you've reached your conclusion. However, based on the facts, I'm drawing a different conclusion. Notice the I language. I'm owning it. And notice the acknowledging of their viewpoint. And this is really important. This is a way to soften a potential high conflict or a combative conversation by validating their viewpoint, because your viewpoint is just one. They have one too, and we need to legitimize that. We may think it's crazy. We may disagree with it, but it's really important in that empathy piece in the conversation. Tell me your viewpoint, tell me your perception, and just legitimize how they're viewing, even though you see it a different way. I generally try to avoid but and use and, because but usually diminishes it. So take the but out here. I look at the first one. I understand your viewpoint, and I see it another way. I should have taken the but out there. Notice I'm being imperfect, modeling an imperfection, but having some grace with myself. The and one, like the fourth bullet point, I can see your perspective, and I have a different viewpoint. You see how and is a bridge word? It allows their reality to coexist with your reality. And so try to drop those buts out of there. Not very good role modeling on my part. So, okay, we'll finish up with the last scenario. Hopefully this will give you some more language around these conversations, and we'll open it up for Q&A. We're going to address Blake for poor customer service. Blake, I called this meeting with you to have an honest conversation about an area of your job performance that has me concerned, specifically your customer service. I'll share a few customer interaction examples of why I'm concerned. Then I'd like to hear your perspective. Then together, we can brainstorm solutions, and together, let's craft a plan to get back on track. How's that sound to you? So there's the opening, trying to be specific. Customer service, I have concerns. I walk through what's going to happen in the conversation, providing that clarity so it's specific. Notice I haven't given any feedback in here. This is just setting the table for the feedback. I said I've got some examples, and I'll give that to him later, but this is just setting it up. So hopefully that opening for the most part works out for you. One thing I've noticed missing just reading this right now, I didn't put any positive in there. I didn't put any of that kind of balanced proportionality. You know, like I said with Maria, you know, 90% of your work is of a high quality, so that's a miss for me here. But I don't always do that. It depends on the person, if this is the first, second, or third time I'm talking to him, but I just noticed that. Blake's reply, he might get defensive, or he might want to say, who said that, or trivialize the fact. Let's say he trivialized the customer service thing. And I might say something like, I hear you, Blake, that this is no big deal. However, I see it differently. So there's that empathy, agree to disagree statement there. I see it differently. Now, where am I going this? I'm going to our standards. Our high customer service standards are non-negotiable for working here. So you see, I'm going to follow that up with the expectations. I'm still going to level set this conversation at every opportunity to level set the standard against I'm holding his behavior. So that's the move I made here. So I'm going to give Blake a little more feedback. Blake, you started with us 6 months ago. Your energy and positivity to serve and satisfy our customers was contagious to the team. However, lately, I'm sensing a totally different Blake. Someone whose positive energy has diminished, someone who's not smiling as much on the phone, and quite frankly, appears disengaged from work. That's my perceptions of things. Please share your side of things. Is everything okay? So I gave him some feedback there. Now, critical on my feedback to Blake, it wasn't that specific. I would be more specific. I would give those examples when and where I saw him not smiling on the phone, what he said to a customer, did not use the customer's name, real behavioral specific. So it's difficult for him to argue. I heard you talking on the phone to 3 different customers yesterday. I didn't hear you use their first name once. That would be specific, measurable facts, observable facts, which are a little harder to disagree with, but some employees still find a way to do it. So you can see I'm opening it up to empathy. He's going to say what he says. For the sake of the role play, we're going to keep pushing through here. Maybe he shared some personal things or something else. Maybe he threw a team member under the bus. I don't really care. I'm still going to stay on track for the conversation. Thank you for your honesty and sharing with me what's going on. That sounds very challenging. I'm wondering, are you still able and willing to show up at work, committed to our customer service expectations and values? So I just want to reset with him. Where is he right now? Because I need him to step up. This is not acceptable. And so that's just me really clarifying and bottom line in the conversation. And this is Blake playing nice because we're on a webinar today and time is of the essence. Yes, I really like my job. I'll be more focused about showing up with more positive energy and bring a smile to all of our customers. And here's me finishing. That's great. To ensure I've gotten your attention to this critical area, consider this a verbal warning, which will go into your file as a written documentation, which you will sign. Thanks, Blake, for this honest conversation, your willingness to turn things around. When you're at your best, you bring so much positive energy to the team and our guests. Hopefully you'll view this written notice as an opportunity to turn things around and live up to your best professional self. So that's me finishing with appreciation. And I was already clear going with Blake about my outcome of this conversation. It was going to be a verbal write-up for his first one. I'll pause right there. Punch through final quote. This one's a little shocking. 40% of employees think their manager won't have honest conversations about work topics. Folks, don't let this be you. Turn this to 98, 99, 100% of the employees think that you will be honest with them. And here's some good news. Under stress, 99% of us fall to what? Little pop quiz. Well, the answer is our level of training. This is an accepted performance principle from elite athletes, special ops groups. Any elite performers know that under stress, we fall to our level of training. So I really want to encourage you to practice these difficult conversations with each other as managers and your team members. Practice these, role play these before you go and have one with one of your employees, because it really does take practice to make these different moves here. So establish some training. And here's the good news. 1% daily basis improvement for 1 year. You're going to be 37 times percent better at the end of the year. This comes from a book, Atomic Habits. So just get 1% better at something you learned today, folks, from today's webinar. I thank you so much for having me, ALTA and Jeremy and ALTA members. Thank you for coming. Hopefully you found 1 or 2 nuggets of value today that you can bring forward. So Jeremy, I'll turn it back over to you. I know we're pretty close to the top of the hour.
Yeah, we are, but we're, like we said, we'll hold some time for Q&A. And again, if we don't get to your question, please reach out to Steve. You got his email there on the slide. Fascinating information on the communication skills, you know, to have some effective conversations. There, you see what I did? I didn't say difficult, Steve. So you know.
I thought that. You're a good.
But they are difficult. So.
Yeah. And you know what, Jeremy? I think part of this, we all have to acknowledge that you just have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. There's no way around it, right?
Yep, and it's okay. So we do have some questions coming in already, Steve. Actually, a lot. So we'll see if we can get through a few here. Many questions, Steve, on if you could share examples on how to conduct a good one-on-one. You recommend doing those more frequently, weekly, bi-weekly. So are those casual? Are they stopping by the employee's desk? Are they coming into the office? Is it by email? Is it by video on Teams? You know, what are some recommendations to have, you know, short, quick, effective one-on-ones?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, all the above. Ideally, face-to-face is the best, of course, for human connection. But if you have work from home or hybrid work team members, Zoom is second best and the phone is third best. But we like to have that facial recognition there so we can connect and be able to read nonverbal communication. So great question there. The one-on-one, real quick. Jeremy, I could send a one-on-one template to you. I don't know if folks would have you send that out to folks if they would want that as a sample.
Yeah, sure. If you want to send that to me, and I'll add that as a link to the email that everyone will get tomorrow. And that's already spurred lots of yes pleases. So
okay, here's the top bullet points here. 1, the one-on-one should largely be about the employee. It should be very employee-centric. What does that mean? That means that the employee does most of the talking. What does that mean? That means that the manager, you manager, have to show up with the coach hat on and take management hat off at the door when you come in. Management hat is also Mr. or Mrs. Fix-It. We don't bring in Mr. or Mrs. Fix-It into coaching conversations, and that's where a lot of managers fall short. They try to fix the team members' problems and issues. We want the employee to fix their issues and problems. We want them to own it. The person that's talking is doing the thinking, and the person doing the thinking is the person doing the work. And you managers are out there, you work too hard already. Don't do the work for the employees. So in order for the employee to talk 70 or 80% of the time, we have to get really good at asking great open questions. That's one of the first big things. Do we cover some business review? Yes, we do, but it's largely about the employee. So here's some quick, great questions for you. How's work going for you? What's going well around here? What can be improved? How can I be a better boss? What sort of resources or support or barriers can I remove to help you be more productive and engaged? Simple, open questions. What's working? What's not working? What do you need from me? How can I support you better? That's all about the employee, right? That's sending the signal that I hear you, your ideas are important. And we also give a little feedback back and forth too. So If you're committed to creating a feedback-rich environment, leaders go first. Leaders go first. So it would sound like this in a one-on-one. Hey, Jeremy, can you give me 2 pieces of feedback for me that would help me be a better leader or manager? And notice what I said there. First of all, it's an open question, but also sometimes when you ask your team members for feedback, they're shy about giving it, right? If you ever had that, they're not going to give it to you. No, and sometimes you really have to dig, especially if you have a low trust quotient between you. We've talked about this. If you have a low trust quotient between certain team members, they're not going to tell you because they don't feel safe, quite honestly, right? And remember, as managers, you have a blinking neon sign in your forehead that you can't see, but your employees can see. And the neon sign says, "I am your boss. I can make your life miserable," right? And some of you have higher voltage, and some of you may even have beware dog bites. But because of the power differential, it can be hard getting good quality feedback from your employees, can't it? And there's a lot of reasons for that, but we have to work on it. We still have to work on it. And sometimes you have to beg a little bit, say, just give me one thing that I could do or stop doing around here that would improve the workplace environment. And sometimes you have to dig and be persistent. But if you want to create good working relationship and honest communication, we go first and we have to pull feedback from people. And once they see they can give you feedback and you're not gonna, there's not gonna be consequences for that, they're gonna be more likely down the road to open up to you. So be patient with that. So your one-on-ones also include giving and receiving feedback. And I might say, Jeremy, I wanna give you just a little feedback to help you be more successful around here. Here's 2 things you're doing really well, Jeremy. Here's one little area I'd like you to take a look at that I think could be improved upon. So we give feedback in those one-on-ones as well. I hope that's you.
Yeah, definitely great tips and suggestions. Yeah, two more questions and we'll wrap up. One quick, one maybe a little bit longer explanation. Could you remind everyone on the call still the personality test you mentioned? Was it DISC? I know there are several ones out there, but what's the one that you shared?
Oh, the personality test, DISC, D-I-S-C. And by the way, those for manager profiles, they're really good assessments, but if you get them through an authorized DISC person, they're gonna run you $130, but they're like 28 pages long, really chock full. But if you don't have that in your budget, there's some pretty good free DISC surveys out there that are great starting points to get a conversation going with you and your staff and team members about personality styles. But that's probably the most. There's Myers-Briggs, that's a very popular one. There's Herman-Brain. Yeah. I like the DISC. The DISC is most widely used in corporate America. And what I also like about the DISC, it's easy to remember. We can remember four domains there. The Myers-Briggs has 16, and so I like the DISC.
Yep. All right, and then one more question, and we'll wrap up. And that's flipping it a little bit. You're offering great strategies and advice to the managers, but what if you're the employee that's struggling with a manager that has poor skills or hasn't developed communication style that is effective? How do you approach this person?
Yeah, this is one of the tougher ones. This is a real tough one. Because it's hard to rearrange someone's core DNA, isn't it? And these tough, but if you want to take the courage and have a long view and attacking it, then I think applying this idea of coaching up or managing up, and this is an important skill set to learn anyway, this idea of kind of how to manage your boss and how to get out of the relationship what you need. And you can start by requesting, like, for example, if this boss, if they don't have one-on-ones with you, start requesting more regular one-on-ones with the boss. And you can go in there with an agenda and saying, I would like your coaching and guidance in these areas, and ask for their support in some of your areas and start to build a working relationship. You have to, what the politics on the ground is. These can be delicate, and you got to be safe here, because I don't know what the nature of this boss is. If you were to give this boss some direct feedback, would there be repercussions for you? And if so, then you got to be careful and don't do that. So we have to be honest, there's politics here and there's power differentials and working it. But I would start by being responsible. Improvement at work starts with I. Improvement at work starts with I. If we wait for somebody else to make a move, that's not being very proactive. We have to rise. This is my pitch on accountability and responsibility. We have to rise above the circumstances and make some good decisions to see if we can change things. And that's being empowered. So giving this manager the benefit of the doubt and trying to work on the relationship is taking responsibility for the relationship in your sphere of control. And that would start by deciding you can go out and Google articles on coaching up or managing up, but it starts with asking for regular one-on-ones and sending agendas in advance and trying to build that relationship and see if they'll come along. Most managers, I find, they feel good when they're supporting you. They want you to be successful. And if you can help them be successful, that makes them feel good. And this manager, they may just not know what to do. It may not be malice or manipulation. They may just feel, it's the Peter principle. It could be the Peter principle, which is people get promoted to their highest level of incompetence. They may be promoted beyond their capabilities, and it's kind of no fault of their own, but that's where you're at. So I applaud you for considering making a strategy on trying to build up this relationship and taking responsibility for it, which you should anyway. And the manager has a responsibility for providing the environment that's going to help you be most successful. And if not, you only have two choices: stay and choke on it or leave. Yep. But this third choice is being proactive and at least giving it a go to see if you can proactively shape that relationship by asking for what you need in a politically smart way. Hopefully that's.
Yeah, no, great advice. I mean, an effective, positive relationship should have a two-way street, whether relationship at work, relationships outside of work, you got to have that communication. You have to be honest, one way and receive it as well from the manager and from the employee. So just as a reminder, we have gone a few minutes over, I apologize. Everyone will get an email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording, a link to download a copy of the presentation, and you'll also get the handout that Steve mentioned that he will provide for the tips on the one-on-one training. And just again, as a reminder, all of our webinars are archived on the ALTA website at alta.org/webinars. Well, Steve, thank you again for sharing your insight on leadership, communications, having the conversations at work that might not always be warm and fuzzies. With that, that'll bring us to the conclusion of today's presentation. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy.